shit.
Edgewater, Florida woke up to water in the streets. Not a small puddle, not a trickle. Entire roads were underwater. Homes were flooded. Cars were stranded. Families trapped inside their own houses. All of this happened before the sun had fully risen. At first it seemed sudden, but residents later realized this flood had been silently building for hours. Heavy rain had fallen overnight, more than anyone expected. The tides were higher than usual. Drainage systems designed for ordinary summer storms were failing, spilling water into neighborhoods that had never flooded before. People watched in disbelief as their front lawns disappeared beneath brown, swirling water. Driveways vanished. Streetlights reflected off the rising water like they were floating on an ocean. Emergency sirens echoed through the city. Some families called for help. Others tried to escape on foot, wading through waist-deep water. This wasn't a hurricane. There were no warnings of a massive storm. It was a combination of natural forces: heavy rainfall, unusually high tides, and saturated ground that struck the city at once. Edgewater, a quiet Florida city, suddenly found itself underwater. And this is only the beginning. The flood in Edgewater is a warning, a glimpse at the risks that millions of people along the U.S. East Coast face every year. In the next minutes, we'll take you through the real story of what happened, the people affected, and why disasters like this are becoming more frequent, all based on verified news reports and eyewitness accounts. The flooding in Edgewater didn't happen overnight. It was the result of a perfect storm of rain, tides, and infrastructure limits. Over the past week, heavy rain had fallen across central Florida. Local weather stations recorded 6 to 8 inches of rainfall in 24 hours in some areas of Edgewater. The ground, already saturated from previous storms, had no room to absorb more water. At the same time, a seasonal king tide pushed water further inland than usual. Roads near the canals and rivers became shallow lakes. Storm drains, designed decades ago for normal summer rainfall, quickly backed up. Water began spilling into streets, yards, and even homes. By early morning, dozens of homes were flooded. On Umbrella Tree Drive, a family reported their house filling with water for the third time since last year. Elsewhere, emergency crews responded to calls from the Florida Shores neighborhood, where water reached the first floors of homes. Cars were stranded, and some families had to evacuate with children and pets in tow. City officials reported that approximately 50 homes were affected, and local rescue teams used inflatable rafts and high-clearance vehicles to reach those trapped. Power outages also occurred as floodwaters reached transformers, leaving parts of the city in darkness. Cell towers were disrupted, making communication difficult, and residents relied on local news and emergency broadcasts for updates. Despite the chaos, there were no reports of fatalities, and emergency crews worked through waist-deep water to deliver food, water, and medical supplies. The mayor of Edgewater later described the flooding as a wake-up call for the city, emphasizing the need to upgrade stormwater management and prepare for rising sea levels. This wasn't just a local problem. Neighboring towns, including Port Orange and New Smyrna Beach, also experienced similar flooding, showing how vulnerable Florida's East Coast remains to even moderate storms when tides and rainfall combine. The events in Edgewater are a stark reminder. It doesn't take a hurricane to devastate a community. Sometimes, ordinary weather conditions paired with infrastructure limits are enough to create a crisis. For the people of Edgewater, the flooding was more than water in the streets. It was a sudden, overwhelming threat to their homes and lives. Families woke up to find their front yards completely submerged. Water seeped into garages, living rooms, and kitchens. On Umbrella Tree Drive, one couple described watching their home fill with water for the third time in just over a year. They scrambled to move furniture, protect valuables, and keep their pets safe. Emergency responders worked tirelessly. Firefighters and city crews navigated waist-deep floodwaters with inflatable rafts, carrying children, elderly residents, and anyone unable to escape on their own. In some neighborhoods, water reached 3 to 4 feet, forcing families to climb to second floors or rooftops to stay safe. Power outages left streets dark, and communication became a challenge. Cell service was unreliable, leaving residents to rely on local emergency radios and social media for updates. Despite the fear, there were countless acts of bravery and community support. Neighbors helped each other, volunteers handed out sandbags, and local businesses opened their doors to those displaced by the flood. In the Florida Shores neighborhood, crews reported more than a dozen emergency calls in a single morning. Water surged through intersections, carrying debris, trash cans, and even parked vehicles. Streets that were familiar just days ago were now rivers, and the hum of engines and sirens filled the air. The human cost was more than property damage. Stress, fear, and uncertainty weighed heavily on residents. Parents kept children close, elderly neighbors were assisted to safety, and pets were cradled in arms as families evacuated. Yet amidst the chaos, the resilience of the community was clear. People refused to panic, helping each other whenever possible. Edgewater's flooding was a stark reminder. Natural disasters are measured not only by what they destroy, but by how communities respond when ordinary life is suddenly turned upside down. Edgewater's flooding was not just a one-off event. It is part of a larger pattern affecting Florida's coastal communities. The city sits on flat, low-lying land, making it naturally vulnerable to rising tides. Many areas were developed decades ago, long before modern stormwater systems were designed for heavier rainfall or frequent king tides. Officials have warned that old drainage infrastructure is struggling to keep up with changing weather patterns. According to the mayor of Edgewater, recent floods have shown that the city's stormwater management plan needs urgent upgrades. Pumps and canals, once sufficient for mild storms, now fail under heavier rains, causing water to back up into neighborhoods. Experts say the problem is compounded by sea level rise. As oceans gradually rise, even moderate tides can push water farther inland. Combined with intense rain events, what used to be a minor nuisance now becomes a serious threat to homes and roads. Neighboring towns like Port Orange and New Smyrna Beach face the same risks. Every year, seasonal king tides and tropical storms test local infrastructure. The events in Edgewater are a warning, showing that climate-related flooding is not a distant problem. It's happening now. Urban planners emphasize that solutions exist, but they require time and investment. Improved stormwater systems, flood barriers, and strategic urban planning can reduce damage. Yet, as development continues along Florida's coast, the risks only grow. This bigger picture shows that the flooding in Edgewater was not just about the rain that morning. It was the result of geography, infrastructure limits, and changing climate conditions colliding at the same time. For residents, it's a stark lesson. Even ordinary storms can become dangerous when cities are unprepared. For the rest of the country, it's a signal that coastal communities must rethink how they build and protect themselves nature's growing threats. The flood in Edgewater is more than a local event. It is a reminder of how vulnerable many communities are to even moderate storms. Natural disasters don't just destroy property. They test our preparedness, our resilience, and our willingness to adapt. In Edgewater, families lost possessions, streets were submerged, and the city's infrastructure was pushed to its limits. But the response also revealed the strength of a community. Neighbors helping neighbors, emergency crews working tirelessly, and residents refusing to panic even as water rose around them. Experts warn that Florida and other coastal states cannot rely on luck alone. Rising seas, aging drainage systems, and increasingly intense rainfall events mean that floods like Edgewater's will become more frequent. Preparing for these disasters requires investment, planning, and awareness. For viewers, this is more than a story about water and wind. It's a lesson about how we live, how we build, and how we respond when nature reminds us who is in control. If this story resonates, take a moment to reflect on your own community. Are the areas where you live prepared for unexpected floods? Could small changes today prevent disasters tomorrow? Edgewater may have faced the flood first, but every coastal city faces similar risks. Awareness is the first step toward resilience. By understanding these events, sharing information, and supporting local preparedness efforts, we can reduce the impact of future storms. Stay informed, stay prepared, and remember, every storm leaves behind two kinds of debris: the damage you can see and the lessons you cannot afford to ignore. If you found this video informative, consider liking and sharing it to help others understand the risks facing coastal communities. Have a story or experience with flooding where you live? Comment below. Your insights and experiences matter, and they can help others learn from real events. Don't forget to subscribe for more real, factual stories of disasters, survival, and how communities respond to nature's challenges. Remember, every storm teaches a lesson, and staying informed is the first step toward being prepared.